Good morning. It's Monday morning, 7 o'clock. It's Monday, March 25th. And today I painted a memory. This is a memory of a pond that I used to walk to here in Florida, even though I lived in New York, but my grandparents lived here. And they lived in a community called Beverly Hills. I'm going to tell you about it in the video that's coming up. So I'm kind of repeating myself, or it'll appear that I am repeating myself. But anyway, so I don't have a photograph of the pond. It looks completely different nowadays because it's all developed and there are houses all over it. But back then, it's kind of what it looked like right there. But see, it's a pretty simple composition, just the trees, the lake, and the foreground grass. Yeah, so let me show you how I did that and tell you the memory behind it right now. Well, hey, how you doing? Today, I'm going back in time. Yes, I am. Hey, there's a brush missing here. Where'd it go? I must have lost a head. I lost the head to one of my brushes. Well, I don't know where it went. So I won't be using that one. But anyway, today we're going back in time. It's a personal memory of my own. And it goes back into the 1960s. I was living in New York. And my grandparents were living here in Florida. They were living in a brand new community called Beverly Hills, which is a city all of its own now, but back then it was considered part of Lecanto, which isn't too far from where I am now. And so my parents would drive us down. We would take a vacation to Florida. And I don't remember all the details about this, but I remember they would leave me and one of my brothers. I had 3 brothers and a sister. And they would leave us, 2 of us, with our grandparents. My grandparents moved to Florida from Connecticut, probably in the early 60s. And I called my grandmother Amma, and I called my grandfather Poppa, which is why when my own grandson was born, my son asked me what I wanted to be called, and I said Poppa. That's why this channel is called Poppa Paints. So anyway, so it would be me and one of my brothers. I don't remember how long we spent down here, but it seems like my parents would leave. I know they would leave. I know they would leave us with our grandparents. And they must have driven back down from New York to pick us up. I never flew. I never took anything else other than the car. So they must have driven twice. They must have driven once to bring us down and then once to pick us up. I just don't remember. But anyway, so we would come down here to Florida and go to Beverly Hills. And like I said, Beverly Hills was a brand new community. It's a big community now, but it was a small one at that time. There might have been maybe 4 blocks, and there was 4 blocks going into what they call Beverly Hills, and then I don't know, maybe a dozen blocks going the other way, parallel to the highway. So one of the things that you could do there wasn't much to do there, to be honest with you, but one of the things you could do there was to walk down to the lake. There was a lake there. A very, very small lake. And you know, it's weird because like now everybody is always concerned about alligators. I'm sure there were alligators back then, but I don't remember seeing any. So my brothers and I would, well, one of my brothers, I was always here only with one brother. I was never here with more than one. Sometimes it was my brother Bill, who's 2 years younger than me. And sometimes it was my brother Bob, who is 2 years older than me. And we would go down, we would walk down to this lake, and after you passed all the houses that were in Beverly Hills at that time, you were in nothing. You were just, it was a very sandy ground, and there wasn't much there. I'm not exaggerating, there wasn't much there at all. But we would walk down to that lake. Now there must have been a boat down there, like a John boat. Because again, we didn't have a boat. So we must have used somebody else's boat. We were just kids. Hey, I was born in 55, so if it was 65, I was only 10. I honestly don't remember some of the details here. But I remember the lake, and that's what I'm painting today. I don't have a picture of it. And if you go there now, it looks completely different. It's all developed. So what I'm doing now is kind of from memory. Well, take away the word kind of. It is from memory. So, and this is what I remember. It was just a beautiful little lake. Actually, there were two of them. There were two lakes. And the two lakes were connected by a little tiny, I don't know, isthmus, whatever you call it, isthmus? Little tiny thing. And it had a little tiny bridge over it. I'm not going to paint that part. I'm just painting one of the lakes as I remember it. And there was a John boat. I'm not going to paint the John boat either, but and there was no motor on the boat, by the way. It was just a boat. And if we had oars, I don't remember that either. Maybe we were just pushing ourselves around with a stick. I'm not really sure. But we would go out there and just push ourselves around, just be out in the water. And it's a very fond memory for me. Somewhere in my old photographs, I have some pictures of myself and Bob. Bob was my older brother. In that John boat, we both were wearing sunglasses. I guess we thought we were cool. Somebody gave us these cool looking sunglasses. So, let's try to... Now, one of the things I remember also about that place was the very, very sandy field, like a giant field of sand. A giant field of sand. And my brother Bill, now this is my younger brother, so this would have been a different trip because we were, like I say, there was only two of us at any given time. So we would go, but my brother Bill, he had this styrofoam airplane that was called the U-2 spy plane. And it had a big old rubber band. I am not kidding. Big old rubber band. And the rubber band, you would attach the plane to the rubber band. The rubber band would stretch out. And then you could launch the plane, and it would fly. It would fly away. And it had a camera, a little camera on the bottom of it. Now, back in those days, of course, cameras had film. So you had to put film in it. And the other thing about it was it had like a wind-up timer release, or I guess you would call it that. And so you'd wind it up like with a spring, the same way you would do a wristwatch back in those days, I guess. And you would let it go. And then once it got to a certain altitude, well, I don't think it had anything to do with altitude. It just had to do with the timer going off. And the timer would go off, and it would take pictures of the ground. And then we'd go, I guess we'd ask my grandparents, can we go get the pictures developed? And I'm sure they paid for them. So we'd get pictures of the ground. There wasn't much to see, because the ground was just sand. So, but that's part of one of my memories I have of there. So that's what I'm trying to paint. I'm trying to recreate here. Just a memory. I did a memory of my childhood backyard one time. I painted what I remembered in the backyard, the swimming pool, the playhouse. They say when you get older, the one thing you have is your memories, right? And I know some people don't have good memories of their childhood. I heard Robert Downey Jr. at the Oscars this year. He thanked his bad childhood for his success. I get it. I get what he means. Not that I had that experience. I had really good childhood memories, as you can tell. So, probably why I wouldn't be a good actor. I don't have anything to draw from. Other than good stuff. Maybe I'm a little, what do you call it, Pollyanna-ish. Could be. But I don't blame anybody for that. I'd rather be Pollyanna-ish than have a negative view of the world. I'm not saying he does, by the way. I don't know him at all. But anyway, so this is see, this is easy for me to paint because there wasn't much to it. It was just this beautiful little lake. Beautiful little lake that just, well, two of them, like I say, two of them that just sat there. I don't remember alligators. Maybe we saw snakes. There was a cow pasture not too far from there. We would sometimes walk over to that cow pasture. My grandfather, my Poppa, he liked to get the cow manure for his garden. So as kids, we would go out there and get the cow manure. Isn't that funny? We'd pick it up and put it in a bucket or something. And then he'd take it home and put it in the garden. Yeah, he was old school. I guess I'm old school now, huh? Yeah. I often wonder if there's a way for people who have passed to know that you're thinking about them. I think about a lot of people who have passed. So the brother that I just mentioned, Bob, he has passed. So I wonder if he's aware that I'm thinking about those times. I wasn't always happy to be in Beverly Hills. I missed my family up in New York, but I got over it. I got over it. I think one of the tricks to creating a landscape is to create a lot of undefined things. Make sure there's a lot of contrast. Do you know, I do have another memory from this place. There were some wild hogs, wild boars that lived in the woods. And if you were in that little boat I was talking about, now the lake was very, very small. Very, very small. But if you're in that boat, sometimes you would see those boars up on the hill. And like stupid boys, we would go up there, trying to get close to them. Now they always would run away. But I say stupid boys because, they guess they could have hurt us, right? I'm not really sure about that, but I think so. I think those boars could have hurt us. This is a series of lights and darks here. Make sure I get some reflections in the water. And again, if you've seen me before, I've used this really scraggly brush. It's got a very scraggly end to it. And I use that. I take advantage of that. And I take advantage also of the dry brush. When it's dry, I can just kind of dab it and create the illusion of leaves way in the distance. Distant leaves. I think everybody has a different way of doing the art that we do. I think that's a good thing. So, yeah, this is a memory of mine. I'm indulging myself in this one. I did have somebody write to me and ask me if I could illustrate a book for them. I have that quite often, actually. And I've done a few books. Most of the books I've illustrated were written by Robin and myself. I've done a couple for other people. I've done a couple of covers for people, book covers. I don't really do that much anymore. I don't I don't know. I think I'd rather paint by inspiration than by assignment. I've done a lot of assignments in my life. I guess we all have, in one form or another. I watched a movie last night about these veterans who had post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and they were dealing with it, trying to use fly fishing as a way to cope with the horrible things that they had in their memories. Robin and I spoke to a guest years ago when we did the radio show, and that was his topic too. We wondered if maybe the movie was based on that, and I think it was. If not that particular one, then something very similar. And you know, it does look very therapeutic. It does look very therapeutic to get out there into a river, get some fly fishing going on, let the fish go when they catch them. That's what they did. Now, I would imagine that this also would be therapeutic, just painting, and maybe talking to people as you paint. So, I'll tell you another thing. I worked as an activities director at an assisted living facility. It's over 20 years ago. I did it for 3 years. Now, most of my career was in radio. But radio can be, it's a very weird business, because you find yourself in the presence of people who have very strong egos, and they all want to be the next superstar, if that makes sense. So when the radio job folded, I guess the radio station sold, I didn't look for another radio job right away. I looked for something else, and I found this activities director position at an assisted living facility, like a nursing home. And I was only in my 40s, so I was pretty young compared to the people who lived there. And I did all kinds of things. I had been involved in activities, not as a director, but as a performer at college. So I worked with activities directors. And just having an activity that you can share with other people was very therapeutic for them as well. Most of them were ladies, but there were some men. And one day, there was a lady. I got a couple of stories from there. There was a lady who lived there. Her name was Shirley. And Shirley liked to paint flower pots. She would get clay flower pots and she would paint them. And so I went and I bought some clay flower pots and I got some paint and I said, yeah, let's do this. And maybe other people would like to join you. And they sure enough did. The other people loved painting the flower pots. So just like I'm painting greeting cards now, there's nothing saying you have to paint paper. There's nothing saying you have to paint a greeting card or a canvas. And so she would paint flower pots, and the people who wanted to also paint flower pots, it became a little club. We didn't have a name for it, but it was like a club. And they loved it. They loved being there. They loved coming in. They loved chatting. And it wasn't just the ladies. Some of the men would come in and do it too. And that's what they would do. They would paint flower pots. It's very cool. Very cool to see that community thing happen. I did a portrait of Shirley in pastel. And somehow somebody must have told the local newspaper that I did that, and they came in and they took a picture of her with her portrait and did a little piece on the fact that I was the activities director, and I thought, wow, that was kind of cool. Then probably less than a year later, Shirley died. And it was a very sad day because I got to know her. In fact, I visited her in hospice when she was in hospice at the end of her life. So, it's another memory. Of course, it has nothing to do with this painting. But it does have something to do with this painting because I think the idea that we painted, the idea that we shared time painting. I also did the watercolors back then, by the way. I didn't do many of them, but I did it because people wanted to do paint, and oil paints were kind of hard to squeeze into the room, and plus you have the fumes of the linseed oil, not fumes, but you know what I mean, the smell. And the superintendent of the place, she didn't really care for the activities that had smells. So anyway, it was a wonderful experience for me. So I have another one from that very place I just thought of. It was puzzles. I went to this thrift shop and I noticed that they had a lot of puzzles that were really cheap, like a dime for 500 pieces. And I said, whoa, I wonder if the people would like some puzzles. So I bought a bunch of these puzzles. And I put them in the activity room, and they sat on a shelf, and nobody did anything with them. And I thought, well, this idea didn't work. Nobody wants to do puzzles. Then I, for some reason, had this idea to just start one. I opened up one of those big folding tables, you know, and I just started a puzzle. Just started it. And you know what happened? That table became a gathering place. And people would sit there and chat and drink their coffee. And they would get to know each other. And keep in mind, these people didn't know each other before living in this assisted living facility. This was all new to them and scary to them in some cases. But here they were, sitting together, putting together a puzzle. And it didn't take artistic skill. And there was no ego going to be bruised if you didn't get it right. It was just a really good experience for everybody. So yes, I learned a lot by just doing that stuff. And then they would put the puzzles together. there was another time where there was a 4th of July event coming up, like that year. Well, there's always a 4th of July event coming up. But that year, I decided to make, I know what it was. We went over to, there was another section to this building, and it was called Memory Support. And in Memory Support, that's where the people who had some form of dementia would live. Some of them had serious, like Alzheimer's, and others had lesser forms of dementia. And I was there one time, and I noticed that if I was talking to somebody about where I was from, I'd say New York, just the word New York. They would brighten up if they were from New York. If I said Connecticut, they would brighten up when I said Connecticut. So I said the Statue of Liberty one time, just, I don't know, I was talking about it. And it brightened them up. There was so many people who had a Statue of Liberty memory. So I decided to make a Statue of Liberty. That's funny. I made a Statue of Liberty. I really did. I made it out of paper mache. And wow, was that a hit. It was probably 7 feet tall. It was 7 feet tall. Paper mache. I made it out of chicken wire and paper mache. And I didn't do it alone. Robin helped me. A lot of the people who lived there pitched in and did little bits on it. And it took a little while. And it stayed in that room, in the activities room, for probably over a year. And everybody loved that Statue of Liberty, except for the superintendent, who thought it was an eyesore. That's what she thought. So she told me to get rid of it. And I did. And I got angry a little bit that she wanted me to get rid of it because the people loved it. So when I got rid of it, I put it in the dumpster. And I made sure it was sticking right out of the top so everybody could see that the Statue of Liberty was in the trash. Yep. That's the rebel in me. So what does that have to do with this? Well, probably nothing, except that you and I are right now. We're together. You and I are. You're listening to what I'm saying, and maybe you're painting, and maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're dancing. Dancing? No, I don't think you're dancing. You could be. But maybe you're painting, or maybe you're... No, you wouldn't be writing, because I'd be interfering if you were writing. So maybe you're painting. How about that? You're painting and just enjoying your day like I'm enjoying mine. Now there's the lake. I just want to make this green over here darker. Like there's a lot of shade happening over here. But of course I want some dappled light here too. There was no beach at this little lake. There was only the grass went up to the lake. Isn't it weird that there were no alligators there? Isn't it weird that we didn't even think about it? I mean, now that's all anybody thinks about when you go to a Florida lake, right? Everybody just thinks about those alligators. Well, they are there, and they're in the news. Do you know what, though? I really, truly think that the laws changed regarding alligators. I think back then there was probably just nobody said anything. If there was an alligator, the people who owned the property or could maintain the property or manage the property, they probably just killed it. I'm guessing. I don't know. So maybe that's why there aren't any alligators. Like today, you have to have a permit. That's why there's so many alligators now, because they're protected. Not completely. There's a hunting season for them to cull them out, I guess. But anyway, let me spread that out a little green. Didn't mean to drip that on there. Just the back of the card. Just blend it in, make it all part of the back. When I give the cards to people, they like when I write my name on the back, so the back has a purpose. Try to lift up some of the paint, get a little bit lighter colored over here. I'll put it back down again. Try to get this reflection going here. Yeah, this is pretty much what it looked like. There wasn't a very big lake, as you can tell. There wasn't much to it. Put some yellow in here. The yellow doesn't really show up as a bright yellow after there's already paint. It just kind of makes it a little bit of a green. The yellow turns it a green. See if I can add a little bit of yellow to some of these trees over here. Yeah, so this is just from a memory. Make it a little bit more defined here. A little bit more definition here. I'm almost tempted to put a foreground thing here like a tree, but you know, another thing I remember about this lake, these little lakes, they had birds in them. They had ducks mostly, and if you brought bread down there, they loved you. Oh man, those birds loved when you brought bread. My grandmother would always give us bread to bring down there. That's why I'm remembering it. I think we don't appreciate some of the older people in our families when we're younger. Maybe we do, but we just don't realize that they're temporary. Isn't that weird? When you're younger, you have people in your life that are temporary. You don't even know it. You don't even realize it. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Right now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little skinny brush. I love this little skinny brush here. I'm going to take some gouache. Straight from the tube. And I think I'll use this yellow ochre. This is Master's Touch, those of you who want to know the brand. I don't think it really matters. And P.S. the brand of Oh, it's brand new and I didn't even use it yet. And P.S. the brand of the watercolor is Winsor and Newton. Winsor and Newton. All right, brand new. Look at that. Let me put a little dab right here. Oh, it's still got the oil in it. All right. The reason I want that is I want some vertical lines in the background to kind of represent some trees. Let me make sure it's very small. That might be a little bit too dark. Let me mix it in with some light. That's also gouache over there. Yeah, little tiny lines. Can you see them? They're hardly there. I don't want to get the brush too wet. I want to. It's almost like painting with oil right now. We'll put these little lines in here. I mean, they're very tiny, but I think it's working. The idea is working. So. Some area in the back, maybe there's some sunlight making it to the ground in the background there. These little tiny white lines. I wanted it to be yellow ochre, but yellow ochre turns out to be too dark. So I'm really working it into the white, making it super, super light. There's some up in the upper parts of the trees too. Super, super light. I guess I could have used white paint instead of yellow ochre. Yeah, do you see how that's making it come alive a little bit? Almost using just one hair on this brush to get some of these lines. A little bit more light on some of these trees here. I got the white here. And now maybe a little bit more of this dark blue-green, just to create some more little lines here. So it looks like the grass is here on the edge. Don't want to overdo it. Little tiny pieces of grass sticking up. Create the illusion of grass. All right. I think I'm done. Hopefully you enjoyed today's painting. Let's see if I have a soft brush here. You know what? I'm just going to soften a little bit of this down here. I think I overdid it with some of those little grassy things, so I'll make them less defined. In fact, let me go ahead and add just a little more depth to this. Just to create more of a look of the dappled light look. Yeah, now it looks more like a shaded shadow area with some dappled light making its way through the trees. That's one thing I remember about this place. It had a lot of trees. And it's just a really great memory. So I do have a third brother, my brother Tom. I didn't mention him. I don't remember spending the summer with Tom. Tom was 4 years older than me. So maybe my parents felt like the older child should be with the second oldest child. So I was always with either somebody 2 years older than me or 2 years younger than me. Maybe that was the idea. There we go. I think I'm going to call it the lake from my childhood. Childhood memory, a pond or something. All right, kids. I think I'll turn it off now. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you later.